You are now listening to the Purple Fox Podcast.
Update.
What's going on, everybody? This is Kevin C. Eze, your host of the Purple Fox Podcast. And today I'm going to be talking about the recent situation with the Ojos Locos opening up on Firestone within the City of Downey. So this clash that I'm seeing within the city is one that I've noticed happening in many local governments. And it's like one of those situations that's on the micro level, and it also expands to the macro level. You can see that in the changing cultures of certain nations around the world. It's the clash between the old guard and the new, and it's something you're going to keep seeing happening because it's part of a cycle of civilization, of cultures, of exchange, where something new comes in and challenges the existing order. And then there's this then tug of war between what will the culture settle on. So tradition in this battle, this tug of war, is order, and the structures in place to preserve the essence of order. And on the other side is liberation. So liberation is the shedding of that tradition to make way for the unknown, the avant-garde expression. So I wanted to put this conversation this update in context with this article by Alex Dominguez in the Downey Patriot entitled, "Downey City Council Considers Regulating Waitresses' Attire." And this is the attire of the proposed Ojos Locos location. Quote, "Public outcry over the scantily clad waitresses at the incoming Ojos Locos restaurant has caught the attention of the city council, who say the city will explore regulating food service attire in the coming weeks. According to 3 council members, the city is looking into creating an ordinance that would regulate the attire of waiters and waitresses at restaurants and bars across Downey. So this doesn't just affect Ojos Locos. If they have to write an ordinance for this, then it'll affect every restaurant around the area that may fit within this ordinance that's passed, if it's passed. To continue with that quote, the council is expected to discuss the matter at their March 8th meeting next week, which they did. So they had that meeting, and then, like most people rightly pointed out, there's not much they can do to stop this franchise from coming into Downey because the contract's already made, and I'll explain it a little bit later, what exactly they can do within the city's charter and the limits. But to do what the residents are asking, it's not within the law. It would be a complete breach of I think California's constitution, our charter, and just I think First Amendment law in general. I don't even know if that's First Amendment. It's just the right to have ownership. That's probably even like Articles of Confederation. I don't know, but it's just not a lawful practice to make a contract with a city and then have the residents up in arms and just to remove that location. The way you can fight it maybe is to not go to the business. I don't know. There seems to be a lot of free press around it, but we'll see how that turns out. So the city of Downey then quickly responds with their own message towards the outcry. So the citizens, they start, the residents of Downey start protesting. We don't want this. And note, what you have to note is that this is a specific segment of Downey. This isn't like all the residents of Downey, and a lot of the ones who don't really mind are pretty quiet. And I think they're in the majority, but we'll see how this plays out. They quickly respond with a message, quote, "The City of Downey realizes that the future opening of the restaurant, Ojos Locos Sports Cantina, has caused concern among residents in the community. The city would like to assure its residents that it values their input and takes these concerns seriously." So the city heard, the city responded to the residents' outcry. And what is it they're outcrying? What is the outcry for? What is the deal with Ojos Locos Sports Cantina? An article written by Ben Cooley in FSR magazine entitled "Ojos Locos Finds Success in Booming Niche Market" explains the origins of Ojos Locos. According to Cooley, in the article, the idea for Ojos Locos Sports Cantina began roughly 15 years ago when Rich Hicks and his former business partner Todd East visited a local Hooters. So they're at Hooters. One of East's employees sips a beer, placed it on the table, and then looked at East and said, "We need a place like this for us," meaning the Hispanic demographic. To add further remarks to the article, quote, "Ojos Locos is similar to Twin Peaks and Hooters in nature, but specifically for Hispanic customers. The restaurant features wall-to-wall televisions, mostly offering Latin coverage, and an all-women wait staff that's mostly fluent in Spanish." Hicks described Ojos Locos as a home game for Latins and an away game for the gringos. It's pretty. If this is the owner, if he's trying to advertise for this thing, that's pretty inflammatory wordage for that. But yeah, that's how they described it. So that's the atmosphere they set for this place. This place that's opened in many different locations. I believe this may be the first location in California, which in a way it's kind of historic. But it seems like the track record of this place doesn't bring favorable coverage. A lot of the residents who have been up in arms have been citing a bunch of crimes that happened in locations around Ojos Locos. They mentioned some things that won't be even coming to that. I think that's what most of what the city council session was about. How they've restricted them to a point. The contract restricted them to a point where they can't do some of the practices that have earned them that notorious reputation from those different locations, meaning that like the bikini contest and all the kind of raunchier activities they would do within the venue. So they've been restricted to just the DJ, food, drinks, that kind of thing. So a regular bar, it's going to be a regular bar. You can cite the dress code, but I think what most people who are up in arms are against is the level of crime that it might, emphasis on might, bring to the city. I mean, last time I heard we have a pretty good police force here in Downey. Not to put them in harm's way, but I mean, I don't think it's anything they can't handle. Yeah. Now, in terms of Downey's demographic, this makes sense. I mean, it seems like this is the Hispanic Hooters. This is their own claim to what that energy is, whatever Hooters is. This is our version. That's what the most people who are in favor of this are saying. But when I consider the location and where it's going to be, I mean, this is the Firestone Strip we're talking about. This is like the main through line of commerce in the city of Downey. You know, like especially around that area, you have the Embassy Suites, you have that Mimi's right there. You have the theater, and just behind that is the city council chambers and the police department, which you could say also that the police will have it handled because they're like right down the street. But at the same time, for that location, that's like the premier sight line within Downey. You're driving down Firestone, And then you see in Ojos Locos, I can imagine a high profile dignitary, if one ever does arrive, or a business entity scouting the city and as a potential location, and then refusing any possible deals because of the notoriety that a venue such as that brings with it. They wouldn't want to be associated with that brand, the city, the brand that it attaches to the city, if that's the concern. I can also see the case for the business revenue of a location that's specifically Hispanic centered in a large Hispanic LA population. I mean, think of the revenue. People, this is the first Ojos Locos in California. So why wouldn't the Hispanic population flood in to support? You know, I can see you owning that and making that your own thing. But again, I think it is the location and the association with the crime that makes it a big deal. So tradition, staying on theme, would say that we need to preserve the purity and the family-oriented nature of Downey in order to keep the status of a step-up community. In an era where it seems like crime and perversion is on the rise, a community of strong moral fortitude must remain. So that's tradition. In combat with liberation, that would say that business is business. And ultimately, the success of this enterprise rests on the level of popularity it'll have. If it fails, then Downey is truly a bastion of traditional values, is the bastion of traditional values it used to be. But if it ultimately succeeds, then perhaps Downey has become something more. It's important to know that once a contract is made with a city, you can't just remove the franchise on a whim, and that's what the council members, the city attorney, and several others are trying to point out to our constituents. However, Downey can place ordinances on the venue, like they tried to do, or like they did successfully with the attire ordinance that they passed on the 8th. So according to the charter of the City of Downey, under Article 14, Section 1405, and this will lay out exactly what franchise practice is within the city. The grantee of the franchise must comply with all lawful ordinances, rules, and regulations adopted by the City Council in terms of governing the construction, maintenance, and operation of its plants, works, or equipment. The grantee must pay the city the cost of all repairs to public property made necessary by any of the operations of the grantee under such franchise. So anything that they moved around, augmented, or added to said property once they leave, they must pay the city the cost to revert it back to its previous condition. They must release the city and its officers from any and all liabilities for damages resulting from any operations under such franchise. They must remove and relocate without expense to the city any facilities installed, used, and maintained under the franchise if and when made necessary by any lawful change of grade, alignment, or width of any public street, way, alley, or place, including the construction of any subway or elevated transit facilities, or if the public health, comfort, welfare, convenience, or safety so demands. So again, making sure if they do any additions or any kind of construction that it doesn't come out of the city's pocket. So the city will then revert it back, but then they have to pay a fee to, offset the cost of the reversion. Because if they're not using the venue anymore. But again, some of these don't apply, but I'm just running down franchise law for the city in general, because I'll explain a point at the end of this. And lastly, the grantee must pay to the city during the life of the franchise a percentage to be specified in the grant of the gross annual receipts of the grantee within the limits of the city, or such other compensation as the city council may prescribe in the grant. So basically, tax revenue. They pay a percentage of what they earn, yada yada. The whole business community spiel. So unless Ojos Locos falls within breach of one of these requirements, there's not much the city can do. Ojos Locos is coming. I mean, people can run them out with their lack of support for the business once they eventually get set up. But I mean, at least for a time, you're going to see that sign go up. Ojos Locos is coming. I always say that harmony lies within the intersection of order and chaos, tradition and liberation. The outrage over this contract is a perfect example of the City of Downey finding its way to that harmony. It may not look like it, but people are waking up in a certain way. Whether that's national craziness or just wanting to really focus in on what makes their lives better. People are starting to pay more attention to the civic engagement and what's moving around, the different parts moving around their city. However, equilibrium within the constituency has to be found first. A new cultural ethos is taking shape within the City of Downey. And there's no denying that. You see all these different moving parts. You see these people pushing for different things. Doesn't seem as unified as it should be. And it's ultimately up to the residents whether they fight that momentum towards harmony, that the battling into that equilibrium tooth and nail, or bring their best selves so that all voices are heard and represented in a civil manner. Events such as these aren't necessarily harmful for a community, especially one trying to figure out what it's becoming. I have faith that a community such as Downey can find understanding and acknowledgement of and for its transformation. There will always be opposition towards the policy of the moment, but ultimately, I think the community will find a way to adapt towards harmony. This is Kevin C. Eze, once again with your Purple Fox update, signing out.